Step beyond the headlines and experience the reality of the courtroom. The material you are viewing is entirely unfiltered and unedited. This is raw, documented footage from the front lines of justice, bringing you face to face with the unyielding truth.
You fit the description of a gas thief. Turn around, sir.
I paid for my gas. You're making a mistake, officer.
I said turn around. Don't make this harder than it needs to be.
I'm a Navy SEAL. You don't want to
I don't care if you're the damn president. You're being detained.
The gas pump hummed in the thick August heat as Darnell Creed swiped his card at pump number 4. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night at the Sunoco station off Highway 9 inches, Beaumont, South Carolina. The kind of humid southern evening where the air sits heavy on your skin and fluorescent lights attract clouds of insects swirling in pale circles against the dark sky. Darnell was driving his matte black Dodge Charger, paid in full, registered in his name, earned with money from a career most people couldn't survive a single day of. He was wearing gym shorts and a faded gray t-shirt. Nothing flashy, nothing suspicious, just a man stopping for gas on his way home. What Officer Troy Engram saw through the convenience store window was something entirely different. Engram, 41 years old and still in full uniform after a 12-hour shift with the Beaumont County Sheriff's Department, stood at the coffee station pouring his third cup into a styrofoam cup. He looked through the plate glass and saw a muscular black man leaning against a car that cost more than Engram made in a year. In his mind, the math didn't add up. The car was too nice. The man was too calm. Something felt wrong to him, not because anything was actually wrong, but because Troy Engram had spent 16 years deciding that black men in nice cars were problems waiting to be confirmed. What Engram didn't know was that Darnell Creed was an active-duty Navy SEAL with 4 combat deployments, a Bronze Star with Valor, and a classified service record that would make most people's knees buckle. What he also didn't know was that 8 security cameras were recording every inch of that gas station in crystal clear 4K with full audio. They were about to capture the worst mistake of his life. Engram had been with the Beaumont County Sheriff's Department for 16 years. He joined at 25, rose to patrol sergeant after 9, then was quietly demoted back to patrol after an internal investigation into an incident where a black teenager alleged Engram slammed him against the hood of his cruiser during a traffic stop. The investigation found insufficient evidence, largely because Engram's body camera had conveniently malfunctioned. No wrongdoing appeared in his file. 9 civilian complaints over 16 years. 7 from black residents. Excessive force during routine stops. Racial slurs muttered quietly enough to deny later. Illegal searches without probable cause. Fabricated charges against people who questioned his authority. Every single complaint reviewed and dismissed by an internal affairs division run by Sergeant Dale Fenton, Engram's former patrol partner and the best man at his wedding. Complaints came in, sat for the mandatory review period, received a form letter, conclusion of unsubstantiated, and disappeared into a filing cabinet no one ever opened. He was named in 2 prior civil lawsuits, both filed by black men alleging unlawful detention and excessive force. Both settled quietly with sealed records and no admission of wrongdoing. Engram never paid $1, never missed a shift. He coached his son's Little League team. He taught Sunday school. And he terrorized black residents with impunity because the system had told him over and over that he could. Tonight, he was stopping for coffee after a long shift. Tired, irritable, armed with his department-issued Glock 19, badge still clipped to his belt. The moment he looked through that window and saw Darnell Creed leaning against the Charger, his entire posture changed. His shoulders squared, his jaw tightened. He set down the coffee and walked toward the door. Every step captured on the interior camera, every step carrying him toward the encounter that would destroy everything he thought his badge protected him from. The main exterior camera captured Engram pushing through the store's glass door and walking directly toward pump 4. His approach was deliberate, aggressive, his right hand already drifting to rest on his hip near the Glock. He stopped 6 feet from Darnell, positioning himself between the car and the pump in a way that blocked any easy exit. The camera above the awning recorded his face, jaw set, eyes hard, a man who had already made his decision before opening his mouth. "This your car?" Darnell looked up from his phone, the pump nozzle still in his left hand, fuel still flowing into the Charger's tank. He registered the uniform, the badge, the posture, and every instinct trained into him across a decade of combat operations activated simultaneously. Assess. Remain calm. Control the encounter. "Yes, sir, it's mine," he said, his voice even and respectful. Engram wasn't satisfied. He asked where Darnell got it. Darnell said he bought it. Engram asked where he worked, how he could afford a car like that, whether the vehicle was stolen. Each question landed heavier than the last, more invasive, more accusatory, each one built on the assumption that a black man standing next to an expensive car owed a stranger in uniform an explanation for his own property. Darnell answered every question with controlled patience, never raising his voice, never making sudden movements, calmly repeating that he was a customer pumping gas, that he'd committed no crime, that he hadn't been told what he was suspected of. He was building a verbal record the same way he'd build a situation report in hostile territory, precise, deliberate, documented. Engram didn't care. He'd already decided Darnell was guilty of something. The cameras captured it all. 2 men at a gas pump, one radiating aggression, one radiating the kind of discipline that keeps you alive in war zones but cannot protect you from a badge and a bias. The gas station wasn't empty, and what happened next would have unfolded very differently if it had been. Frank and Diane Kowalski, a white couple in their early 52nds, were parked at Pump 3 finishing their own fill-up when Engram approached Darnell. Frank had been cleaning his windshield. He stopped mid-wipe when he heard the tone in Engram's voice, that particular edge of authority that crosses into something uglier. Diane, still in the passenger seat, leaned forward to watch through the windshield, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. Inside the store, Sophia Reyes, 24, a nursing student on her way home from a 12-hour night shift at Beaumont General, was paying for gas at the register when the confrontation began. She turned toward the window and watched Engram's posture, watched his hand resting near his weapon, watched Darnell's deliberate stillness. She recognized what she was seeing immediately. In the parking lot, sitting in a faded pickup truck eating a sandwich he'd bought from the store 10 minutes earlier, Clyde Abernathy watched in silence. Clyde was 67 years old, a retired postal worker who had lived in Beaumont County his entire life. He didn't own a smartphone. He couldn't record what was happening. But he watched with the quiet intensity of a man who had seen this exact scene play out in 50 different ways across 50 years and knew exactly how it could end. Behind the counter, Hector Nunez, the 22-year-old clerk, glanced at the security monitors, showing all 8 camera feeds simultaneously, and quietly began backing up the footage to a secondary drive. His manager had trained him to do this whenever police interactions happened on the property. One by one, cell phones came out. Sophia started recording through the glass. Frank stepped away from his car and recorded from the adjacent pump. The audience for Engram's performance was growing, and he didn't care. Engram's next words came out as a command, not a request. "Let me see some ID." Darnell didn't argue. He announced every movement before he made it, loud enough for the cameras, loud enough for the witnesses. "I'm reaching into my back pocket for my wallet. My hands are visible. I'm moving slowly." He pulled out his wallet, extracted his South Carolina driver's license, and held it out with his fingers spread wide, the card visible between his thumb and forefinger. Engram snatched it from his hand with unnecessary force, the motion captured on the overhead pump camera in sharp detail. He studied the license for an unreasonable amount of time, turning it over, comparing the photo to Darnell's face, checking the address, looking for something, anything, that would justify what he was doing. He found nothing. The license was valid, the address was local, the photo matched, everything was clean. Instead of returning it and walking away, he escalated. "Put your hands on the vehicle." Darnell's voice remained steady. "What crime am I being detained for, officer?" Engram didn't answer. He repeated the command louder, his voice echoing across the station. Darnell complied, placing both palms flat on the Charger's roof, but stated clearly, "I do not consent to any search. I have not been informed of any crime." The search was violent. Engram slammed Darnell's face against the roof of the Charger, grinding his cheek into metal that had been baking in August heat all day. He kicked Darnell's feet apart so wide he nearly lost balance. He emptied his pockets, wallet, phone, car keys, a protein bar, throwing each item onto the concrete. He popped the trunk without consent or warrant, rifled through a gym bag containing workout clothes and military-grade boots. Found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no contraband. Just the belongings of a man who serves his country. The overhead camera captured every second. The awning camera caught Darnell's face. Eyes closed, jaw clenched, a man using every ounce of discipline not to react. Should police officers be allowed to search someone without probable cause simply because of the car they drive? Comment below. Engram stepped back from the trunk and slammed it shut. He had nothing. No contraband, no weapons, no stolen property, no evidence of any crime whatsoever. His justification for the stop was evaporating in real time, and the frustration was written across his face, captured in perfect detail by the awning camera positioned just 8 feet above him. Every officer who has ever conducted a baseless stop knows this moment. The moment where the smart move is to hand back the ID, mutter something about routine checks, and walk away before the situation gets worse. Engram didn't make the smart move. He leaned in close to Darnell, who was still pressed against the Charger with his palms flat on the roof. The awning camera's microphone captured what came next with devastating clarity. Engram told Darnell that people like you don't belong in this neighborhood after dark, that he knew Darnell was up to something, that next time he wouldn't be so polite about it. The words hung in the humid air, recorded from multiple angles, impossible to deny, impossible to reinterpret. Darnell's response was quiet, controlled, and it changed everything. I've served 4 combat tours, protecting this country. I have a Bronze Star. I've bled for people who look like you and people who look like me, and you're telling me I don't belong at a gas station. Engram froze. For 2 full seconds, captured in perfect clarity on the awning camera, his face registered something between shock and rage. He didn't expect credentials. He didn't expect calm, articulate resistance from a man he'd already categorized as a threat. He didn't expect a warrior. Then the shock hardened into something worse, and he made the decision that would end his career, his freedom, and his life as he knew it. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. The cameras captured every frame. Engram grabbed Darnell by the back of the neck with both hands and ripped him away from the car. Darnell's palms left the roof of the Charger, and before he could even process what was happening, Engram drove him face first into the concrete. The impact was audible on 4 different audio feeds. A sickening crack that echoed across the station and made Sophia Reyes flinch behind her phone screen. Darnell's forehead split open on the pavement, blood pooling immediately, bright red under the fluorescent lights, spreading across the gray concrete in a shape the overhead camera recorded with horrible clarity. Engram dropped a knee into Darnell's back, pinning him down with his full weight, shouting commands that contradicted each other. "Don't move," followed immediately by, "Put your hands behind your back." Darnell, bleeding and disoriented, his vision blurring from the impact, tried to comply with the second command. Engram wrenched his arms back with enough force to partially dislocate his left shoulder. The handcuffs went on so tight they bit into skin and would leave scars that Darnell would carry for the rest of his life. Frank Kowalski was screaming from 10 feet away. "You're going to kill him! Stop! Somebody help him!" Diane was on the phone with 911, sobbing, reporting that a police officer was assaulting someone at the Sunoco on Highway 9. Sophia had moved outside, still recording, her hands shaking so badly the footage vibrated, but every frame was usable. Clyde Abernathy had gotten out of his truck and stood 20 feet away, tears streaming down his weathered face, watching history repeat itself one more time. Inside, Hector had already called his manager and corporate security. The 8 cameras never blinked. They recorded everything. They didn't look away. They couldn't. Backup arrived 11 minutes later. Two on-duty deputies from the Beaumont County Sheriff's Department pulled into the station with lights flashing and found Darnell Creed face down on the concrete in a pool of his own blood, handcuffed, completely still, not resisting. Engram was standing over him, breathing hard, sweat soaking through his uniform, his right hand still resting on his hip near the Glock he had never needed to draw because the man beneath him had never once fought back. Engram started talking the moment the deputies stepped out of their cruiser. He told them Darnell had reached for his weapon, that he'd resisted lawful commands, that he'd been aggressive and non-compliant during a routine stop. The lies came easily, practiced, delivered with the confidence of a man who had never been contradicted by evidence before. The deputies took his word initially, the blue wall holding firm the way it always had. They loaded Darnell into the back of a cruiser without medical attention, without cleaning the blood still running down his face, without asking him a single question about what had happened. Then Frank Kowalski stepped forward. He walked directly up to the senior deputy and spoke point blank. "Everything that man just told you is a lie. I watched the whole thing from 10 feet away. That man never moved, never resisted, never reached for anything. Your officer beat him for being black at a gas station. And there are 8 cameras and 4 cell phones that prove it." The deputies hesitated. Sophia walked up and offered to show them her recording right there. Diane told them 911 had a recording of her call describing the assault in real time as it happened. And Clyde Abernathy, quietly, with the gravity of a man who had waited decades for someone to listen, said, "I've seen this my whole life. This is the first time there might actually be proof." The senior deputy looked at the blood on the concrete, at the phones still recording, at the cameras mounted on every corner of the station. He reached for his radio. Something had shifted. Hector's manager arrived within the hour. He didn't hand the footage to the sheriff's department. He handed it directly to investigators from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, called in after the 911 recordings and witness pressure made it impossible for Beaumont County to handle the case internally. The footage was catastrophic for Engram. 8 angles, 4K resolution, full audio. Every single camera told the same story. A man pumping gas, approached without cause, interrogated without justification, searched without consent, brutalized without provocation. The overhead pump camera showed the neck grab and the slam in sickening detail, Darnell's head bouncing off concrete with an impact that made investigators wince when they watched it for the first time. The awning camera captured "people like you" with studio-quality audio clarity. The interior camera showed Hector watching in real-time horror, already backing up the files to the secondary drive. There was no ambiguity. No room for alternative interpretation. No angle that told a different story. There was only a police officer committing aggravated assault on an innocent man, while 8 cameras recorded his every move. When SLED investigators pulled Darnell's military records, the case became a national story overnight. An active-duty Navy SEAL with 4 combat deployments and a Bronze Star with Valor assaulted at a gas station for the crime of existing while black. Sophia's cell phone footage hit the internet first. 2 million views in 48 hours, then 10 million. Then the numbers stopped mattering because every major news outlet in the country was running the story. The gas station footage followed when SLED released selected clips during a press conference. The image of Darnell's blood on that concrete, bright red under fluorescent lights became the photograph that defined the case. And somewhere in Beaumont County, Troy Engram watched his life unravel on every screen in America. Engram was arrested 9 days after the assault, charged with aggravated assault under color of law, deprivation of civil rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, and filing a false police report. His bond was set at $250,000. He posted it with his house. SLED's investigation expanded rapidly. They subpoenaed every complaint ever filed against Engram, unsealed the 2 prior lawsuit settlements, and interviewed 31 prior victims who came forward once they learned there was finally video evidence that someone might actually listen. The pattern was staggering. 16 years of targeting black motorists, fabricating probable cause, conducting illegal searches, and using force against anyone who questioned his authority. The federal trial lasted 4 weeks. Prosecutors played the gas station footage on the first day and the last day. In between, they called 14 prior victims to the stand, each telling a version of the same story. Stopped for nothing, searched for nothing, brutalized for nothing, believed by no one, until now. Darnell testified for 6 hours across 2 days. He never raised his voice. He described the assault with military precision, timestamps, positions, force vectors, exactly how a SEAL debriefs an engagement. He described the moment his face hit concrete and he made the conscious decision not to fight back, knowing that if he used his training to defend himself, he'd either be shot or charged with assaulting an officer. "I've been trained to neutralize threats in under 3 seconds," he told the jury, his voice steady, his eyes fixed on them. That night, the threat was wearing a badge, and I knew that if I protected myself the way I've been trained, I'd be dead or in prison. So I let him break me open on that concrete, and the cameras saw what happened. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. The verdict came back on a Thursday morning, guilty on all counts. You could hear the gasp from the hallway. The sentencing hearing lasted 1 day. The judge called Engram's conduct a disgrace to the badge and a stain on every officer who serves honorably. 7 years in federal prison, one of the longest sentences for a single victim police assault case in South Carolina history. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. Troy Engram would never carry a badge again. The civil lawsuit proceeded separately. Darnell's attorney, a relentless civil rights litigator named Monique Desmond, who had built her career dismantling departments that protected violent officers, sued Engram personally, the Beaumont County Sheriff's Department, and the county itself. The claims were devastating: civil rights violations, failure to supervise, deliberate indifference to a documented pattern of misconduct, negligent retention of a known dangerous officer. The county fought it for 5 months, then settled abruptly when their own attorneys told them the footage made a trial unwinnable. The settlement was $4.7 million, $2.1 million in compensatory damages for Darnell's injuries, a fractured orbital bone, a partially dislocated shoulder, nerve damage in both wrists from handcuffs applied with punitive force, and PTSD that a man who survived 4 combat deployments never had until a cop slammed him into concrete at a gas station. $2.6 million in punitive damages, calculated specifically to punish the county for 16 years of looking the other way while Troy Engram destroyed lives. The settlement mandated sweeping reforms: an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, mandatory bias training with annual certification, body camera requirements for all interactions including off-duty officers in uniform, quarterly public reporting of use of force demographics, and a zero-tolerance policy for complaints involving racial language or profiling. Beaumont County would never operate the same way again. The cost of protecting Troy Engram had finally come due. Darnell used $1.5 million of his settlement to establish the Creed Foundation, a legal defense fund providing free representation to victims of police misconduct who couldn't afford attorneys. He partnered with law schools across South Carolina to create a clinic where students handled civil rights cases under faculty supervision. He spoke at the Naval Academy, at police academies, at community centers in neighborhoods where people had stopped believing the system could ever work for them. He spoke not with anger but with the quiet authority of a man who had seen violence from every angle and understood that accountability is the only thing that separates justice from tyranny. The gas station footage became required viewing at SLED's training academy. Hector Nunez, the clerk who backed up the footage to a secondary drive because his manager had trained him to protect the evidence, received a Community Service Award from the NAACP. Frank and Diane Kowalski testified at the state legislature in support of a bill mandating independent investigation of all police use of force incidents. Sophia Reyes finished nursing school and volunteered at a free clinic Darnell helped fund. And Clyde Abernathy, the 67-year-old retired postal worker who had watched from his truck with tears on his face, gave one interview to a local paper. "I've been waiting my whole life to see one of these go the right way," he said. "That young man bled on that concrete so the cameras could see the truth, and for the first time, somebody listened." Engram sits in federal prison, still insisting he did nothing wrong. The 8 cameras disagree. If you believe that officers who assault innocent people deserve prison time, that security cameras don't lie, and that standing your ground with dignity should never cost you your blood, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Tomorrow we have another story that proves the truth always finds a way to surface, because the cameras were rolling and they saw everything. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. And speaking of sleep, if you're someone who lies awake at 2 or 3 a.m., mind racing, unable to shut off, I know how frustrating that is. You're exhausted, but your brain just won't stop. And the worst part, the less you sleep, the worse it gets. Your energy crashes, your mood suffers, everything feels harder than it should. I struggled with this for years. Tried melatonin, white noise, warm milk, nothing worked long term. Then I found something called the 30-Day Uninterrupted Sleep Reset. It's a science-based program, no pills, no medication, that actually retrains your brain to sleep through the night. 7 to 8 hours, uninterrupted. Over 30 days, it rewires your sleep system. And once you're done, you keep the results. There's a maintenance plan so you don't slip back. Look, if you've tried everything and nothing sticks, if this is different, check the link in the description. Seriously, try it, and I'll catch you in the next story.
In our relentless pursuit of the truth, we refuse to look away. We are committed to holding power to account, because at the end of the day, the records don't lie. Thank you for watching our channel.